Welcome to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Congressman-Elect Alan Lowenthal. He has been a state senator, a state assembly member, Long Beach City Council. He's a father and a grandfather. And now the Congressman-Elect from the 47th California Congressional District. Congratulations.
Thank you, Brad.
What went right?
Everything went right. It was a great night for Democrats in California. We saw the president do extremely well. We picked up, I believe, 2/3 majority in the state Senate. I believe also we have a 2/3 majority in the California Assembly.
Which is huge. I mean, no one expected
it.
Right.
Proposition 30 passed, which is going to protect education. And I won a great victory.
You did, and I think it's fair to say that even though your seat was seen as a likely Democratic seat,
right,
you did have a feisty Republican opponent, Gary DeLong, who you've known for many years,
yes,
a arguably moderate Republican, Long Beach City Council member. He put up a pretty big fight, raised a lot of money. But a 10-point victory is a good one.
Yes, it is.
So why do you think the voters resonated with the Alan Lowenthal campaign?
Well, I think that, you know,
people know me.
Yeah. I talk to them. People know me. I have, you know, I have fought for this district for so long.
Right.
I think that people know I'm a person of integrity. What I say is what I do. And I think that my opponent was a very strong, as you point out, Gary ran a very strong campaign, actually probably a moderate in Republican from Long Beach, is about the strongest person that you can run, because you have the 41% in Orange County, which is Republican, so he was going to do well. And I think his object was to peel away votes from me. Here he is, a sitting city council member.
Right.
So his job was to take away votes from me in Long Beach, and it was and we fought over those, but he was not successful. I actually increased the amount of votes I got out of Long Beach.
But I do want to ask you about Orange County, because even though Orange County arguably is becoming less Republican than it had been, I mean, that's new territory for Alan Lowenthal. You have not served in Orange County in the state Senate or the Assembly. How was it running in that territory?
Well, as you pointed out, it was a difficult challenge. First, Orange County is not the same Orange County that we remember it, that our fathers remember it and mothers remember it. It's a county that's changing greatly demographically. There are all these different pockets in the district. And so it meant that I had to spend a lot of time getting to know people. I think it's going to take the next couple of years to continue that, to develop those relationships.
I want to talk about Orange County specifically in demographics, because you brought up a very interesting point, and that is the demographics of this area, of this state, of this nation. The Orange County pockets included significant Asian American communities. For decades, the Asian American community had been trending Republican, especially in Orange County with Vietnamese voters. If you look at the national numbers, Asian Americans voted over 70% for Barack Obama. He gained 11 points from 2008 amongst Asian Americans. I'm not sure about your breakout, but this is a sea change.
It is a sea change,
in my opinion. When you spoke with Asian American voters in Orange County, what were you hearing? Why all of a sudden are they trending so strongly Democratic?
Well, if you look at the Asian American community in Orange County that I spoke to, a large percentage of those were Vietnamese Americans. And similarly to the Cuban Americans, that first generation that came from in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, strongly anti-communist, had suffered great abuses, were really very much aware of the terrible oppression that still exists in Vietnam towards anyone who disagrees with the official policy. And so they were staunchly pro-Republican. Their kids are now coming out of college. Their kids are now the young entrepreneurs. They're the second and even in some cases the beginning of the third generation. They are different than their parents. My campaign, what was so interesting was the literally dozens of young Vietnamese Americans that volunteered on the campaign. They were so excited to now have a campaign that they could play a major role in. We set up a an office in Garden Grove almost entirely staffed by young Vietnamese Americans who loved the opportunity to come back and serve their community, to have a candidate they believed in, and to really begin to be to learn the skills so that they can go back into their own communities and become leaders in the future.
Let's talk about the Latino community.
Yes.
That community voted overwhelmingly for the Democrats in greater numbers in 2012 than in 2008.
That's right.
This district has a growing Latino population. Yes. You know, when you start combining totals, 90% African Americans for Democrats, 70% Asian American, Latinos, Jews, it's quite a coalition for the Democratic Party.
That's right. And I think that it's a lesson for the Republicans to learn. I think that what we're going to see is you're going to see more speaking out by people like Rubio, the senator
Marco Rubio, Republican,
to talk about Republicans have to take a more comprehensive approach to immigration reform. If Republicans really want to reach out to the Latino population, they cannot be perceived as anti-Latino. They can still want to have real immigration reform and secure our borders, but they can't be perceived any longer as being anti-Latino. And I think that's their great mistake.
Right. I want to ask you about your arrival to Washington. It will be the first time you will be part of a minority party.
Yes.
The Democrats did quite well in the Senate. They increased their majority in the House. The Democrats gained seats, but still in the minority.
Yes.
You're ready to be in the minority party, sir.
I'm ready to. I'm so excited about being in Washington.
Of course.
And having this opportunity. I know it's going to be difficult, but I think that was another message that came through. People are frustrated with the lack of movement in the part of the Congress, but they believe when they looked at their choices, I think they said, you know, we've been through a horrible time in this country. We have seen our economy almost destroyed, unemployment very high, jobs.
Sure.
But we're beginning to see improvement. People want us to work together. I think that we're going to see now in the lame duck Congress, we're going to see tremendous pressures, and I think it's coming from the American public to do significant deficit reduction and also do it in a responsible way. Don't destroy what we have. Don't destroy Medicare. Don't destroy, but make them sustainable and protect them. And I think that message is going through.
But if you look at the message, I mean, Barack Obama's won the popular vote. The Electoral College was a pretty smashing victory. Democrats won virtually every close race in the Senate and many in the House. But you have a Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, still being pretty recalcitrant in his opening foray after the Obama re-election. And so how do Democrats...
It's all posturing. I think it's all going to be done. Oh, yeah. I think that, you know, I think that we have now, we're going to get a real clear picture in the next few weeks because we have... we have the debt ceiling that has to be dealt with. We have sequestration with tremendous cuts coming through you know, in the next month or two. I think that compromise is going to be on the table right now because I think it's in everybody's interest to compromise.
I have to ask you, and I want to look back for a second. You grew up in New York. You went to The Ohio State University.
The Ohio State University.
To get your PhD.
That's right.
You came to Long Beach to be a professor. Did you ever dream?
Never in my wildest.
That you would become a U.S. Congressman from Long Beach?
Never.
Where in New York did you grow up?
I grew up in Rego Park, Queens.
Queens. Okay, my mother from Whitestone.
Right.
So
never never did I ever read. This is such a wonderful country. I'm the first in my family to go on to college. Really? I you know, immigrant Jewish parents.
Right.
It is wonderful that I have had.
Are your parents with us?
No, they both. My mom just recently passed away.
What do you think they would think? What about your grandparents?
Kvelling.
That's a word in Yiddish, which means they're so proud.
They're kvelling.
I am very happy for you. I congratulate you. He is the Congressman-Elect for the 47th Congressional District in California. His name is Alan Lowenthal.
Thank you.
My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Laura Doud. She is the city auditor in the city of Long Beach, and election day a couple weeks past. I want to talk about one measure unique to Long Beach. It was called Measure O. And I must say, Laura, that on its face, it seemed like one of the good government initiatives that voters would like. It would have consolidated municipal elections with state federal elections. But you were in opposition, and the voters came out on your side. It lost. What happened? I'm a bit surprised, but you'll explain why the voters may have soured on it.
Well, thank you. Like you said, on its face, it looks like a good thing. When I first read it, it looked like a good thing as well, but as we dug deeper and read the details of it, it really wasn't a consolidation and it wasn't going to save money.
Explain why it wasn't a full consolidation.
The ballot measure language left out the school boards. So the school board election would continue to be in April, and then the primary would be in June and the general in November. So it would go from 2 to 3, and it would cost an additional $1.2 million.
I have to say that I don't understand how the ballot initiative was drafted in such a way. I mean, I'm not trying to take a position, but it really seems as if this isn't rocket science. You want to consolidate them all.
Right, exactly.
What happened?
We're not sure what happened.
Right.
But that's how it was drafted. It didn't make sense to us, so we opposed it. And I think the voters saw through it and saw it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it lost pretty handily.
Right.
About 55-45, 55 on the no side. But what's interesting is you and the mayor were on the no side, but there were some council members on the yes side. I mean, this was not a slam dunk in terms of the establishment coming together to oppose.
Right. And I think the people saw it as in opposition, and it would cost $1.2 million, so it wasn't a
And
good
in
thing.
times of very difficult fiscal times, $1.2 million for a city budget is a nice chunk of change. If it comes back where the entire municipal process would be consolidated, would you support something like that, arguably?
I think so, and we'd have to see how much the county could support the election process and how much the county would charge the cities. Right now, the election is run by the cities. If we consolidate with the state and feds, the county would run it and they would bill us. So we'd want to make sure that the costs were
that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, let's talk more about costs, because you are the elected city auditor and you have been conducting audits in the city of Long Beach, and you recently conducted an audit with regard to water department rates. And what you found is in 2009-2010, rates were increased by 15 and 16%. Now, you haven't said that those rate increases were on their face improper. Is that correct?
Right.
But the ratepayers were told X, and X didn't happen. What's X?
Right, thank you. This audit was in response to the ratepayers' questions about why their water rates were increasing. So we looked into it a little bit and found that the water department's budgets showed that they were projecting huge amounts of money for capital improvement projects.
Right.
And so their budgets were actually showing shortfalls, so they needed to increase their rates to pay for these projects, but the projects weren't done.
So the rates went up 15 and 16% over the last few years for capital improvements, and we have seen no capital improvements.
Minimal, that have not.
I mean, Laura Doud, I got to say, that just causes one's blood to boil.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like what's happening in Los Angeles with their DWP.
Right. So we wanted to bring attention to the fact that they needed to have, our recommendation was for them to have a better plan and better management over these capital projects. Because at the same time these projects weren't getting done, their reserves were building. Their policy is to keep a $6 million reserve. Their reserves over the past few years increased 566%, up to $43 million.
So they went from $6 million in reserves to $43 million in reserves.
In a 3-year period of time.
I mean, I'm glad to see they're creating reserves given what's happened with some municipal entities, but wow.
Yeah, and in fact, it's sort of a good problem, because this is money they have that they should be using, that they could be creating jobs.
Right.
This is work that needs to be done. So our recommendation, our focus was have better management over these capital improvement projects, have better management over your budget so that you can set your rates appropriately.
Now, in Long Beach, the water department is an arm of the city. Is it independent, semi-independent?
It is a department of the city of Long Beach, and it is run by a 5-member board. Those 5 board members are appointed by the mayor.
So does the mayor have the authority to direct the board members, to direct the department to start spending money?
Yes.
What are we waiting for?
Yes, yes.
When was the audit delivered, and when are we going to see some building?
Right, and the water department, we always give our auditees an opportunity to respond. They agreed with our audit.
Oh, they did?
Yes, they agreed.
And so we need jobs. And so, I mean, I know you're not in the water department, but do we have a sense as to when they'll start spending money on capital improvements? Because look, I mean, infrastructure creates jobs. You said it.
Yes, right. And I think soon. I think that they've taken this seriously and that they're getting ready to get to work.
Okay, I want to talk to you about fraud because the voters have been clear in so many different ways that they see their money as sacred. And when they are giving money to a governmental entity, they want to know that that money is being spent wisely. I mean, look, the voters did pass Prop 30. They are taxing themselves more.
Right.
And when we hear stories of fraud in government, that just causes voters' minds to explode. We saw what happened in Bell. We saw what happened. I mean, I don't know if there was fraud in Stockton or San Bernardino, but there are real issues going on with how our money is being spent. And you are doing everything you can to try to ferret out fraud. I mean, I remember you told me recently there was just a really flagrant, I don't know if she's been convicted, so I guess I should say alleged, in the animal services. In animal services.
Yes,
I mean, just pocketing money.
Right.
I mean, how dare she?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is very troubling. And the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners have stated that there is an estimated 5% of every organization's annual revenues lost to fraud. So we just celebrated this International Fraud Awareness Week to let the employees and the public know, to be aware, to be alert, that if you suspect fraud against the city, to report it. Their office, it is a serious problem that we take seriously, that we'll pursue it. We're not going to tolerate it, zero tolerance. And but we'd be sticking our heads in the sand if we pretended it didn't.
So, for example, with the animal services individual and what she was doing, why don't you tell us again briefly what was happening there? Because in some ways it was so simple.
Right. There was a manual system going on for a long time.
Manual.
Manual.
That means in 2012 they're writing. They're not on a computer.
Yes. Well, she was a 20-year employee that had a manual system forever. It had just converted to an electronic system. But the main problem was this one employee had access to all cash, all revenue coming into that department. There was no oversight. There was no proper management, supervisor review.
Sure.
And there was no separation of duties. So she had the ability to collect the cash.
She was her boss, her subordinate. She was everything.
And deposit the cash, right. So if you're collecting it, reporting it, and depositing it without any check.
So how was she caught?
Yes, there was an employee that noticed the deposits one day didn't match what was collected the prior day. So she did a little digging and found that like almost every day they didn't match. So she called our office.
This woman, I understand, was pocketing cash and depositing checks. Is that?
Yeah.
So, but you said it. She called your office.
The one that detected it.
Yeah,
That's
tell
right.
us it. So this is an example of the fraud hotline working.
Exactly. Yes.
Tell
and
me.
the majority. I know.
Yeah.
The majority of the fraud cases are detected by a tip. So we encourage people when they suspect fraud to call us. Our tips are good tips normally, and so this will help us catch people. And as this woman is in state prison right now for 3 years.
So what's the phone number? I don't have it. Do you know it offhand?
It is 888-FRAUD-07.
It's that simple.
Yes, it's that simple.
Some people, though, get a little nervous that they'll get dragged into a morass. Are these calls anonymous?
Yes, it is, and that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing it up.
Please.
The whistleblowers are protected. They are completely anonymous. Our fraud hotline is 24 hours, 7 days a week. A third party takes the call.
Oh, really?
Yes, and they can remain anonymous and be protected.
So there's no question that if you're sensing that there's fraud in your organization within the city, and I'm sure whatever city you're in, I'm sure they have fraud hotlines. In Long Beach, one of the major cities in our state, there is one that you should call because it is our money.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
it's my
right.
money,
that should be used to provide services to the public.
Of course. Okay, her name is Laura Doud. She is the city auditor for the city of Long Beach. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for watching California Edition. It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest today, Al Austin. He's a member of the Long Beach City Council. And sir, I want to speak with you about some Long Beach propositions, about some California state propositions, and the national election recently passed. I know in the past you've worked with the union movement, and I think it's fair to say it was a big night for the union movement in California. Prop 32, which would have limited union rights in terms of payroll deductions, it lost pretty handily, over 56% of the vote.
I worked very hard on that campaign, and I'm so glad that the people of California voted and spoke loud and clear that they believe that workers, but everybody should have a right to participate in the political process. And anytime you try to exclude that, I mean, there's a problem there.
And what's interesting about Prop 32 is if you looked at the language of the initiative, there was something appealing about it. Take money to interest, corporation and union money out of campaigns.
Right.
The problem was, as I understand it, and as many editorial boards said, the title, the wording was deceptive. These aren't my words. These are the words of the editorial boards.
Right.
And it really was targeting union involvement, and the loopholes for corporations were quite large.
Corporations don't contribute to political campaigns through payroll deduction of their corporations. They just write big checks and generally now they're sending them through super PACs, and their voice is heard loud and clear.
And I want to ask you if you agree with the following analysis. If Prop 32 had not been on the ballot, and the unions had not been so involved in defeating Prop 32, Prop 30, the governor's tax initiative, would not have passed.
It may not have passed. I can honestly say that Prop 30 was the secondary message when we were talking to voters about No 132.
I have to tell you, I was phone banked. You know, I have 2 registered voters in my home, and so I got no calls other than from no on 32, yes on 30.
Right.
It was very interesting how the message was coupled that way.
And it was probably an unprecedented campaign in terms of coordination statewide with labor as well as the California Democratic Party and other organizations who saw that this was a very, very deceptive and destructive initiative.
And what was so interesting about Prop 30 is
Prop 32.
No, I'm now moving on to Prop 30.
Right.
What was interesting about Prop 30, which is the governor's tax initiative that did pass with 54% of the vote, is that as we were heading toward Election Day, it was losing. I mean, it was below 50%. Maybe at the end, some internal polls saw an uptick, but it did pull it out.
Well, I credit that to the ground game. I mean, there were polls, but the GOTV efforts on behalf of labor, the California Federation of Labor, particularly here in Los Angeles County, big counties like Alameda County, Los Angeles County, GOTV operations pulled out occasional voters that really, I think, made the difference in this election.
And I want to move to Long Beach. There was an initiative on the ballot, a measure it's called, Measure N. Really interesting initiative, measure I should say. And it dealt with creating a living wage ordinance for hotel workers, setting a minimum wage essentially, specifically for hotel workers. I'd never seen anything like that before.
It guarantees that our hotel workers in Long Beach, in hotels with rooms, more than 100 rooms, will make a minimum of $2,000 a month.
But how did this happen? I mean, I'm taking nothing away from the hotel workers, but it is interesting that, in a major state like Long Beach, there's a measure specifically to help hotel workers.
Well, first of all, it's not new. They did this in Los Angeles, particularly in the airport area.
Oh, right, I remember that, yes.
I want to say that was about 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think, yes, I remember now.
And so now it's come to Long Beach, and, there's been a lot of resistance to organizing the hotels, and there's a history there in terms of the efforts to unionize the workers there. Efforts have come to the city council, and the city council has, I guess, rejected labor peace agreements or didn't allow those to. They were vetoed by the mayor before, and so I think the remarkable, what makes Measure N so remarkable is that they went to the voters and gathered signatures. They gathered over 30,000 signatures and took it to the people and allowed the people to say, hey, you know what? We think that there should be some economic justice for workers in the whole hospitality industry in Long Beach.
And the voters spoke very loudly.
Loud and clear.
63% of the vote. This was not a squeaker.
Right.
This was a real blowout. Please.
And I think it also says that the whole concept of being a labor union or being worker friendly is not a bad thing here in Long Beach. I think the voters here in Long Beach are starting to embrace that with election after election after election.
Speaking of elections, I want to speak with you about the re-election of Barack Obama to the presidency. I think it's fair to say that if you look at the demographic trends, demography is really heading in the direction of the Democratic Party. African Americans, 90+% for Barack Obama.
Right.
Latinos, Asian Americans, Jewish Americans, 70% for Barack Obama. How does the Democratic Party solidify those gains?
Well, I think we've been solidifying those gains for the past several years, particularly here in California. California is a solid blue state. And I think it just speaks to the policies and the philosophy on the platform of the party. I mean, we are the big tent party. We embrace just about everybody. There is a lot of disagreement even within the Democratic Party, but at the end of the day, we stand for everyday people. We are the party that are giving. I'm saying we because I'm obviously a Democrat.
Yes, no.
But we are certainly giving everyday people here a leg up. Folks who are working class are trying to get into the middle class.
Right.
We're holding the line for the middle class. You know, there are some really serious economic issues facing our country right now.
I want to ask you about the African American vote, because that demographic has really performed quite nicely for Barack Obama and the Democrats over the last two cycles. Barack Obama, obviously an African American, and I wonder if there is not an African American at the top of the ticket in 2016, 2020. Where does the African American vote go? Does it stay so firmly entrenched with the Democrats at 90+%?
Well, I think the African American vote was pretty strong for President Bill Clinton.
No doubt, but at these levels, though, I mean, these are soaring over 90%.
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, there's a message, and there are issues facing our country that are mobilizing not only African American voters, but Latino voters in large numbers as well, young voters in large numbers, women voters, and so the Democratic Party is, I think, speaking to those issues, and the Republican message, in my opinion, has gone to the extreme, where you have, you know, the Tea Party message pretty much, and the ultra-right message pretty much, you know, encapsulating the Republican Party, which is pushing away so many voters.
And what I found so interesting about the demographics in this election, I think a lot of folks, prognosticators, believed that Barack Obama would do very well with African Americans, with Latinos, but the spike that he received in Asian American votes, I mean, up 11% from 2008. Asian Americans, I mean, that group had been trending Republican recently. And you think about the Vietnamese community, I mean, they had been Republican. But now you see virtually every ethnic group swinging pretty strongly to the Democrats.
Well, like I said, I think you can look at the Democratic Party, particularly here in California, and you can see, you know, African Americans, you can see Asian Americans, Latinos, LGBT. Just about everybody is represented in our party in leadership.
At the same time, the white vote is slipping a bit for the Democrats. Barack Obama got about 39–40%. In California, higher, but how do you continue to speak with Americans of European descent?
Well, I think, for one, I know the Democratic Party is a party of inclusion and a party that embraces everyone. If you have the viewpoint that you can work with people of all backgrounds, the Democratic Party is your party. And so, you know, I honestly think here in California we just see the world a little bit differently. When you look at
Apparently so.
When you look at that map, you know, it's a solid blue here on the West Coast, and everything in the middle gets a little
right.
a little right.
I hear you. His name is Al Austin. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.
I'm Assemblyman Kurt Hagman, and I'd like to take a moment to wish you and your family a happy holiday season and a healthy new year. The holidays are not as much about opening our presents as opening our hearts.